with my huge audience here. So I'm Sterling Greene. I'm an engineer at Gradle, and we maintain the Gradle build tool. So has anyone here actually used Gradle at all? Use it in anger? Okay, good. As an engineer, we get to work on some really cool things. So one of the things I worked on last year, something we call Composite Builds. So I'm going to tell you about some of the things about it. So one of the things that all projects come across or have to make this decision of, are we a multi-repo organization or are we a mono-repo organization? Right? And that has to do with do we want to make it really simple to build everything together so we know everything works together? Or do we want to get better performance by people only having to work on a couple things at a time? Or do you want the convenience of being able to refactor some public API and it change everything in your company? You kind of have this dichotomy where you can't have both, right? So it's the difference between I have dependencies that are external dependencies, or I have dependencies that are project dependencies. With external dependencies, you're kind of saying, okay, I'm getting that jar, I'm getting that version, or I'm using snapshots, and then who knows which version of things I'm using. Or I'm using a project dependency, and then I get, when I open up IntelliJ or Eclipse, then I get in a huge a multi-project build, I'll get all those projects even if I don't care about them. So Composite Builds is basically a way of breaking down that difference, of trying to make it so you can have your cake and eat it too. If you can think of it as with a composite build, you're taking multiple independent Gradle builds and you're kind of sticking them together. And what that lets you do is it lets you have a build that's independent and has only external dependencies, and it doesn't have any project or doesn't use project dependencies. And then when you put it together with another build that produces those external dependencies, they get glued together as if they were all in one big project. So what that looks like is in your file, you can actually say include this other build from another place, and that lets you have local experimentation, so you can, if you're using some external project or external library, you can just add it into your project, mess with it, and then put it back out when the upstream updates again. Or if you want to do, like I said, if you want to do something where I want to change a public API across the whole company, I can bring all those in for that one-time thing, and then once I'm done, I can shed it all again and go back to just the few projects I actually work on. This also works for plugin development. So if you've done Gradle plugin development where you usually have a project that you want to try your plugin in, there's all sorts of little hacks and stuff you can do that with, but a lot of times it comes down to you doing a build, publishing it to a Maven local, and then consuming it and having to remember, oh yeah, update Maven local so I can get it in my local build so I can try it out. But with a composite build, you can have the plugin project, you can have your sample project, and you can glue them together and use them outright. So I'm just going to jump right into showing you some things with it. So I have some example projects here. If I switch back somehow. So I have, in this tiny, tiny font you cannot read, I have a sample project, and it uses some external dependencies, this number utilities and string utilities, and let's say I found a bug in those in one of those utilities, and I'd like to go and fix it. So I could say, to do that, I'm going to have to say, okay, we'll make number utilities. We'll actually make that now a project dependency, and I'll come up with some name for that, and then and do it that way. Or maybe that's too much trouble. What I could do is I can make it a snapshot dependency, and I could go down here and I could say, oh, I'm only using JCenter, but I could also say, okay, I'm going to start using Maven local. I could do that and know how to. I know how to build and publish to Maven local and consume it that way. But I don't want to do any of that. I don't want to actually change my build file at all. I just want to take my existing project. I want to take the my external dependency that I'm using, and I want to make changes to it, and I just want to use it. So I have I've already got a copy of the external dependencies here. This my utilities, number utilities and string utilities, and what I can do is I can just say Gradle assemble include build my utils. And I did this earlier, so it's already going to be up to date, but you can see that it's doing compilation for this my utils, number utils. If I did this, and it's also building my local project down here. And if I run it, I can actually see the bug. And it's the example changed. If I can actually, the answer is, so in my example, I'm supposed to be printing out like 19 plus 23. 19 plus 23. It's 42. I've already fixed this because I did this earlier. So let me put a bug in it so that you can actually see. So I have the other project, and I'm going to make it so that this actually doesn't work. So I changed the third party code. I haven't modified my build scripts at all. I'm just saying, hey, there's this other build. Include when you're building mine. Also build. Also look at this other build. And so I've broken that code, and now I actually see that 19 plus 23 is some big number, which is not right. And if I go back and I fix it again, it'll go back to being correct. So this is to give you an idea of I can take an existing build, I can take another existing build, I can jam them together, and I can very easily see changes from either one. But let's say I don't want to necessarily have to remember to always type include build to make this work. Like if I'm doing this in CI or something, I don't want to have to like set this up to say, oh, include this other build over here if it exists. So what I can actually do is in my settings file, so this is in my application, I can actually say include build and give it the path to my utils. And now if I take this off and run again, it does the same thing. So everything's working, everything looks right. And I can go in, I can do the same thing, I can break it and make it incorrect again. We see the same thing, get the wrong answer now when I run it. So now I could check it in like this. I could say, hey, here's my utilities. This other build I need to include when you're building my app. But if you think about like CI, and maybe CI doesn't check things out, you don't check out all the projects at the same time. You can also make this dynamic because the settings that Gradle file is just Groovy code like any other build file. So you can do something like only if my utils exists do I want to include this build. All right. So I have my regular build, and then if there is a my utils at some other location, include it, and then do the substitutions automatically for me. So that's pretty neat. If I look at this in like Eclipse or IntelliJ, you have a question?
So wouldn't that break the CI build? It's going to try to add it. It's going to try to do what's it going to do with CI build?
Sure. So the question is, wouldn't this break my CI build? So because this is Groovy code, you can say, hey, only do include build if the other project actually exists. So on CI, if it doesn't exist, then it won't include that build. And because the build, because my application is using external dependencies, the idea is that it would just switch back to using the external dependencies. Yeah, so that's the idea. So and if I were to look at this in Eclipse or IntelliJ, which I'll do if we don't run out of time, This is supposed to be like an hour-long thing. I'm just going to rush through. Yeah, so if you looked at this in Eclipse or IntelliJ, it would look like just like any other project. Like if it was like one big build, you wouldn't see anything really different about it. So another kind of way of doing this is, let's say that I have, instead of just having one application and I want to include some other things, I want to actually, on CI, I have this big multi-repo organization, and I want to get feedback earlier than when a new version of a particular library gets released. I want to know that, every day I'm going to do like a nightly build that pulls everything together. So what I can actually do is using something like, it's hard to see. I can have like a mono-repo composite defined that all it does is say, go and find all of the builds that are in a particular directory and include them all inside one build. So I don't actually have to be inside like an application build. I can just make an ad hoc, like this build, all it does is build other builds. And what that would let you do is, like, if you have two projects that only integrate when another version gets released, instead of you finding out a month later when a release comes out, you find out the next day when you do this full composite build. So let me go through and show you what I think is like the cooler example for me is actually using this for plugin development. So I have a little consumer build, and it's using our kind of standard example of a greeting task. And what I would like to do is develop this plugin, and I don't want to have to publish my plugin to Maven Local. I don't want to have to deal with getting it to a repository somewhere. I just want to make changes to the plugin and make changes, and then see the changes in that build immediately. So if I go to my plugin example, one more, and I go to the consumer. So this build has a Gradle, has a greet. I didn't run this one earlier. So I have the build that runs greet or greeting, and it just says hello mate. And you can see the same thing here where it builds the greeting plugin before it executes my task. And all that is that I have a build script dependency on my greeting plugin. You can see over here. And normally that would just come from your Artifactory or Nexus or some external dependency. And I also have the plugin source, and I can come in here and I can change the message. Like, so instead of saying hello, I can say heya, and without publishing anything, without having to worry about any of that, I can just run my build again, and I see now it says heya mate instead of hello. And I mean, that's like kind of I think the coolest thing about developing plugins now is that you're not worried about what's going in your local repo. Did you remember? Did you forget? All that stuff. So another example, and I'll give you some time at the end of this if I get to it to ask some more questions. But another way of using this is, let's say that you decided early on that you wanted to be a mono-repo company, and now you've decided, oh no, we want to actually, now that we have 100 engineers, and because we have this really structured organization in our repository, that these 10 people only ever work on these two things, and that sort of thing, that we actually want to take it and we want to take our mono repo and we want to take it and split it up into multiple repos, but we don't want to do that as like a big bang. We don't want to just like shut down the company for a week while somebody goes through and and runs all the get branch filters, get filter branches to split the repository up. So what this lets you do is with a composite build, you can go ahead and start defining what those little pockets will be, what those little groupings will be, and make them all separate projects, separate builds. And then you can combine them all back together as a mono-repo. So day to day, the mono-repo is what everybody's still using, but if you're in the know, if you have been working towards splitting it up, then you can also just work on just those little sections. So I have the same kind of example here of the app and the number utils, string utils, and it looks very similar of being able to I've taken my project and I've divided up already into pieces, and I've said, okay, I've got this number utils module, I've got a string utils module, and I just plop a settings.gradle into each one of them, and it says, okay, this is the one project, this is my other project, and then I'm at the root level, I'm doing the glue code to make them all into one big mono-repo still. So that's pretty cool. The output looks basically the same. Let's see if I have set this up. I think I did. Gradle, run. Yeah, so it looks very similar. It does the build for these separate projects, but they are actually completely separate builds. Yeah, so let me quickly go through a couple more things in the slides. So there's a longer demonstration of kind of the same things I just showed you from IntelliJ, and they actually go through in more detail about the actual IntelliJ integration. You can also do all this stuff through Eclipse, through BuildShip. So we maintain the BuildShip implementation for Eclipse, so it's the Gradle integration with Eclipse. So it does these same things. And so let's talk about some limitations. So you currently, from the command line, you can't target tasks that are from included builds. So in my example where I had my app and I had some third-party library that I was using, if that third-party library had some special tasks I really wanted to run, there's no command line way of saying, in that other build, go run that task. There are workarounds and things that you can do in terms of defining the same task again, so you can call it, but you basically can't call it. There's also the way that we figure out what the substitute between an external dependency and a project dependency is pretty fixed. So it's based on the group and the name of your project. It's not based on if you're doing kind of special publications where the name of your publication doesn't match the name of your project, then the substitution doesn't work right now. We also don't execute the other builds in parallel. So if you have a bunch of included builds, we don't have a single task graph across all the builds to be able to execute them in parallel. Continuous build, so that's the command line flag where you can say, build this thing, but put it in continuous build. Doesn't work with composite builds, so we don't see the changes made in the composite builds through continuous builds. It's like this stuff, never want to use this now because it's half broken, but it's really good. It really is good. This is not a big deal, most of these things. We're doing more work on this this year. So another thing you can't do is nested composites. So nested composites are where you have a build that includes another build, and then you want to include both. Include that one as well. You can only go one level right now. There's also some other things where if you wanted to include another build and say it only works with Gradle 1.1 and your build's working with Gradle 3.4.1, 3.5 RC was out yesterday. Please give it a try. But if you wanted to import that build and only worked on an older version, right now they all have to share the same version. So whichever build is kind of the outermost build. That's the version of Gradle that we use. And there's also no support for build scans. So build scans are a like build analysis tool that Gradle's working on, Gradle the company is working on, and it gives you insights into like a timeline view, dependency diffs, all that kind of cool stuff. Right now they don't support pulling out build information from Composite Builds, but that's just sort of a work they need to get to. So those are all the slides. There's some more information you can go and get at Gradle.com. If you would like to ask me some questions, I have apparently another 10 minutes. I can be happy to try to answer some questions. And I can also try to go through and do a little demo with IntelliJ and actually import the project. I didn't see you sitting there. So, any questions? Good, bad? Yes, sir. How does it handle transient dependencies? Oh, so that's a good question. So it handles transient dependencies just like it would normal dependencies. So it's not, you don't have to just have the first level dependency get substituted. If any dependency along the graph could be substituted, we will substitute it. So if it's like one is an external dependency and another one is a project dependency, we can, or could be substituted, we will put it in there. Okay. All right, so I will go back to the one example I had at the very beginning, and I'll actually generate the IntelliJ config for it. What's it called? Basic. All right, so this is the build where I had my basic app, and I added to the settings file an include for my utilities for the settings or for the string and number utilities. And now if I actually open that in IntelliJ, sure. Which side? For the oh, sure. So this is just generating the IntelliJ configuration, and this is for the settings.gradle file. So here I have, I'm just saying include this other build that's .myutils from the current directory. And if we open this up, you can see my wonderful organization here. So yeah, so my app and my utils just show up as regular old modules in IntelliJ, which you cannot see. I don't know how to make bigger. And if I were to go in here and remove this and run again, it would actually be broken because I don't have a local copy of those dependencies. But when I refresh this, it now goes back to only maybe showing my utils, my app. Maybe. I have to remove the other things, don't I? So it goes back to just, I removed the composite, now I'm back to just my one project, which has one source file, because it's so good. And if I go back to doing this again with include build, my utils from the command line again, and take a look at IntelliJ. I've got back to having all three. Cool. All right. Any other questions? And what I can do is I can actually, I'll tweet out a link to this video, which has a longer demonstration of it all. So I'm at argfile, which I'm really surprised was available since I only got that last year.
Can you show us the title of that video?
Sure. I think it's something like, let me connect. I want to say it's something like Composite Builds with IntelliJ or something like that. So there you go. Composite Builds with Gradle and IntelliJ. You'll see very similar slides. Sir.
So I don't have a question, but I have some feedback and I want to share something with
Sure.
the group. So we at LinkedIn, we built a LinkedIn-specific IntelliJ plugin. And at LinkedIn, what you can do is you can, and we leverage that feature, create a composite build, so that from IntelliJ you can select multiple code bases, multiple projects, and it automatically loads that to IntelliJ, so you can have like cross-code base refactoring stuff. And it's basically leveraging Gradle composite builds. So thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Anything else? Nope. Yeah. And I'll be around to answer any other type of Gradle questions you have, not specifically about this if you like. I'm good? Thank you.